Hey folks, what's going on, man? Today we're gonna paint something awesome, and no, it's not coronavirus, though everybody who watched me paint it online thought it was coronavirus. It has a resemblance, maybe it's a distant cousin, but this is the Beholder from Dungeons and Dragons. Always wanted to paint a Beholder again, and we get a chance to do it right now. So we're going to start drawing here. I'm drawing with a brush on primed, gesso board, basically. I'm using FW acrylic inks there. And I'm just going to town based on the rough drawing that you saw behind me, which I transferred onto the board and began drawing. I used Robert Simmons white sable brushes, which you just saw there a second ago. And we're just going to town, man. This is all about the contours. It's all about trying to build volume around the beholder to really get that sort of basketball shape. Notice I used multiple colors to ink this thing with. I kind of worked within color zones that I knew I might be visiting later in the painting. So, I would go from green to blue to purple to whatever, because I thought it would come through the paint later and maybe play something interesting for us. But this is a lot of drawing, man. It's just drawing and redrawing, and you can see how rough the one behind me is, and this is just like the evolution of that. I'm not really even looking at that drawing anymore. I'm just paying attention to what's going on in front of me. I did the homework back there, so now it's time to just like be in the moment with the drawing. And there we go, doing it up. Upside down even, why not? Turns out a beholder has 10 eyeballs. I don't know if you guys know that, but you got to have 10 eyeballs on a beholder, so we had to get that going. I was going to have all the eyeballs look right at us, and my wife Teresa was like, man, you should have the eyeballs kind of look around different directions. We're doing a little bit of dry brushing on this thing now, just trying to get a little bit more volume built into just the underpainting, and this is just the early stages of the drawing. And there you go. You can see that's the finished drawing, and now we're ready to go. Oh, we're also going to put a 20-sider on the bottom. Yeah, because D&D. So now we're going to town, and what we're doing is we're pounding these things with washes of acrylic paint, and I mean it's pretty watery. I've actually put it in cups with water, extra water, to make it super syrupy, but I'm spattering, I'm dripping, I'm building in those values. But I knew the biggest challenge here was going to be, how do I get the mouth to read really deep in space and different than, say, where the nose would be. You could see I actually put a nose on it in the beginning. I thought, oh, a nose would be cool, but you got to be willing to change things, man. And I did. I got back the next morning and I was like, I hate that nose. It's got to go, bro. It's got to go. So we'll get there in a second, but I kept on wanting to do the first thing, which was, how do I knock that mouth back in space? But I also wanted the dark center of the face to have a core of darkness. Instead of like having all my highlights collected around the snout, I wanted the highlights to be around the peripheral with it, because I thought it would help with the sphere. So I kept on going darker with the snout area, and then suddenly my mouth wasn't dark enough, because value-wise they were reading like they were on the same plane, and we couldn't be having that. So it was just a trial and error. I'd go darker in the mouth, and then I'd go darker on the snout, and then I'd go darker in the mouth. And eventually I actually brought out the black FW acrylic ink to really push the inside of that mouth back. And that definitely made a difference. You can see that I'm painting right over the teeth there. You'll see why in a second. I really just didn't want to have to avoid all these little sharp teeth. But yeah, so now is where I'm painting the inside of the mouth, and I'm trying to push it back in space, casting some shadows, and it just wasn't working for me, guys. Like, I kept thinking, man, there's something else I got to be able to do here to make the inside of this mouth a little bit more interesting, but I didn't know the answer yet. I just kept on going in and rendering, and you can see again in my drawing, I was looking at that for the values, and I was kind of close to the values there, but there still wasn't enough pop happening for me. But anyway, it was not for lack of effort, but I moved on. I went down to the lower jaws, where I knew there was going to be like a green light kind of coming up from underneath the beholder, and that allowed me to introduce another color. I didn't want that blue gray everywhere, so we got out the super bright green, also FW acrylic ink, and did a little bit of red with a little spot of blue. And this is me just going in and finding those nooks and crannies, those little areas, those little pockets where I could push everything a little bit darker. But this was the move of the entire piece. And again, it was the next day, and I was like, damn it, I'm just going to paint the inside of this mouth blue. Like, I thought, what if it was like almost like it was like a cave or something? You know what I mean? Like, where like a cave has like a bioluminescence. That's not exactly what I was going for, but I thought I really want to separate this off. So instead of just going like super dark with it, I decided to go lighter in the blue. And the moment I did it, I was like, yes, this is going to work out just fine, man, just fine. So once we got that in there, it was time to expose the teeth. So we just finger painted them real quick. Oh yeah. No, I'm actually kidding. You'll see in a second what I did for those teeth. But then we're going back over, painting them with the FW acrylic ink, moving color all around the piece, and just having a good time with it. And of course, what I used was masking fluid to block off the teeth the whole time I was painting them, so I was just rubbing them off with my finger a second ago. Anyway, you can see that I'm trying to, this is a very colorful painting, like really colorful, especially for me. And what I'm really trying to do is move that color around. So I like the colors to dissolve into each other. So you can see how that bright blue in the mouth is fading towards the red and into the green. Along the side of the face, you can see how the green kind of dissolves into the more purples and in those sort of areas. And that's really how I kind of got the harmony for this thing, is that I didn't just isolate the colors to like one spot. If there's a color in this piece, chances are it was used in a number of locations. Tried to get more depth in that under jaw. I really wanted it to be tucked under, so you got that feeling like we were really looking into the mouth, that sort of upper mandible. And then I'm going in and adding some darks, hitting, again, I call them the Thomas's Nooks and Crannies accent points, but right there, you can also see like sort of up there around the that first tentacle on the upper left that I went a little bit darker, almost with like a scale pattern, because texture-wise, I also wanted to shake it up. I just didn't want to use the same texture everywhere. So we're bouncing color. Now we're working blue on one side of the eyeball and kind of the purple magenta on the other side of the eyeball, and then it all goes down to green as you get lower. As I get to the edge of the thing, I'm kind of going darker, but I know there's going to be a secondary light coming in from the outside of the piece. And this is sort of you just working up your highlights. I'm just slowly building up to these highlights, small and smaller details. And, really like going back to the big brush, that's a filbert we got going on there to try to make some bigger moves. I was getting to the point where I really needed to figure out what was going on with the background. I mean, I know you can see in my study, but I needed it to be on the piece. And for that, we did this, which is so satisfying to do after you've done all this sort of grunt work. But we used one-shot lettering enamel. It's the kind of paint that a hot rod pinstripe artist would use, perhaps. And I call it the gouache of oil paint because it goes down so opaquely. I mean, this is pink. If you were to do this in acrylic or oil paint, you know how many coats it would take to normally do this? One shot. That's why they call it one shot. So I was able to blast this in, and I liked how you could see through it a little bit and see some of the old textures and stuff that were beneath it. That was cool with me. And now with that value firmly established, I can really judge the values for the rest of the piece. It seems to be working out for me. I'm able to keep that core center of the face and the snout kind of dark, darker than the edges of the piece, but the mouth is certainly separating off, and you know that that is an internal space, and they're not fighting for each other value-wise. So I'm just working those colors around, man. You can see I'm kind of jumping. My brush is never in one spot. Like, I'll do a lot of a green in one area, and then I'll just like blast it in just a couple little spots as you get away from it. And there you go. So we're starting to get a variety of textures, variety of colors. We're really building mass here, building up some of those highlights into that upper mandible again, starting to get some of that rim light, some of that background light coming in and just brightening things up a little bit to give it that little bit of extra crispness. That brush is just flying, man. No, it's not really moving that fast. Of course, this is all time lapse. But anyway, I'm trying to figure out how those lights are gonna, how those eye stalks are gonna stick into the sphere. And here I'm painting the first eye stalk. I had to start with one. Once I figured out one, I was like, okay, now I can do the rest. There's a little bit of variation in all of them, but the basic recipe was the same for them. Each of these eye stalks took me about an hour to paint, and there are 10 of them. So that's 10 hours in eye stalks right there. And I was going mad by the end of it. I was like, my God, just no more eyeballs, please. But that was the job, man. The job is just to keep going on this thing and get all those. I could just like leave those undone. They had to be painted too. So anyway, working our way around slowly, changing up the purple because I get bored. I'm like, let's try some purple on this one. Oh, let's work that green. We'll bring some of the green from the lower jaw up into that eyeball, right? Like that works. Very cool. Finally, we get to the last damn eye stalk, and I can just feel it, man. I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting so close. Because after this, I know it's just a race to the finish line. So what I'm going to use here too is I'm using actually like there you go. I'm using the golden acrylics. And I'm using their green. Oh, I'll put a post of it up there, but I think it's like some sort of green, light white green that they use. Working that green in again because I figure if it's bouncing up on the bottom of the jaw, you actually see that kind of hit the eyeball stalk too, and maybe even reflect a little bit within the actual eyeball. Working those colors around, and this was dessert, guys. I've been saving this eyeball for the very end of this painting. I'm well over a week into this thing by now, and man, it was just the whole time I'm like, I want to do the eye. No, I'll hold off. And this is the most detailed eye I have ever done in my life. That is for sure. And that was the finish. There it is, guys. The Beholder. We did up the 20-sided die at the bottom of it. You didn't see it there, but it's down there. Big zoom in on that eyeball, showing all the fibers and all the colors represented. Hey guys, I appreciate you sticking with me through this and following along, and heck, all of you should do your own Beholders. This was a treat to do, and hell, I'll have to do another Beholder soon. It was too much fun. All right guys, thanks.